Yo, what's good, Rush Nation? Welcome to episode 86 of 5 Yard College, or as today it looks like KPNG Steelersville, because Ash and I are both representing the Pittsburgh Steelers with our hats. It was pure coincidence. I knew Ash would have one on because he's not going to have anything else, but I threw mine on. And if you are watching via the video link and you are very astute at checking out our shirts, you will notice that we both have the limited edition 5 Yard College shirt on. Say they're limited edition. You can't buy them, but if you are keen on getting one, hit me up and we might be able to sort you one out. But they are staff only at the moment, and the boys got theirs recently, and I must say they all look pretty good. So Ash, we are here. The combine has been and gone. Irrelevant information. See you later. Thanks for coming. We're here to talk running backs and tight ends today. How you doing, my man?
I am doing very good. Yeah, it's a bit later in the week for recording, but feeling fresh, ready for the weekend, and ready for the podcast.
That's it. We're bringing you on your rainy Fridays. We're bringing you the Friday feels with the running backs and tight ends. I've got to admit, Ash, you are going to be most of the tight end talk because I haven't had a chance to look at any of them yet. Don't know whether that's poor form on my part or not, but hey, we're here to talk college football. We've got a couple of little bits of news. The first one is very exciting for me because I thought Jaden Daniels was going to be entering the draft, but he didn't. He stayed in school. He decommitted from Arizona State and has wound up with Chip Kelly in LSU. Now, he entered the portal in February, so it's been around about a month since he was looking around. But it's given Brian Kelly a huge boost to the already talented quarterback room. There's Miles Brennan, Garrett Nussmeier, and obviously incoming freshman Walker Howard already there. But somebody like Jaden Daniels, who's now in his fourth year. This is his fourth year. Yeah, rookie year in 2019, exploded onto the scene as a rookie, as we all know. Had a couple of slightly downer years with Arizona State, but has transferred to a school with a new head coach, new program in place. Probably the best wide receiver in Keyshawn Butte, and Jaden Daniels also brings the fact that he's got wheels. He's very mobile. We saw it in his first year. Perhaps they relied on it a little bit too much in the second and third years at Arizona State, but he does bring that to a quarterback room with Nussmeier and Brennan that perhaps don't have that dual threat ability.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's like I say. I mean, it's a good move for Brian Kelly. Obviously, he's got himself another top quality college quarterback to make a decision on. Obviously, Brennan coming off of the shoulder injury, missing most of last year. They obviously lost Max Johnson. They got the incoming freshman, as you said, Walker Howard. So it's a very interesting time there. I think it's probably a bit of a kicker for Miles Brennan, considering he entered the transfer portal himself in November and then came back out in December once Johnson had left. So it'd be interesting to see what he decides to do. I think I honestly don't know. There was talks that he was happy to stay because Brian Kelly came in, but now with Jaden Daniels there, is he going to decide to leave? Well, try and leave once again. It's an interesting situation for him personally, but I think it's a big plus for LSU and for Jaden Daniels, like you say, Butte there. As long as he comes back fully fit, and it'd be interesting to see how he transitions into Brian Kelly's offense.
And it seems to me as well, this isn't the sort of move you make as a Jaden Daniels to go there and possibly compete. I mean, there will be a competition, as we all know. Spring football is just around the corner. I'm not entirely sure when LSU get back to the field, but for Jaden Daniels, this has got to be a move where he's going and thinking he's going to be the alpha. He's going to be the starter week one because he needs to be for his draft stock, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's made decisions to go back for one last year into college, so he needs a good year. And it's this spring practice is going to be a big decider. I don't think they go back until sort of towards the end of April, and that's the first game the end of April. I think they are just after the pro day is the official start, but I know they start getting in at the sort of at the end of March. So, but yeah, first spring game is end of April.
Super. And then another quarterback, former Texas quarterback Casey Thompson, has started Nebraska's spring practice as the #1 quarterback in their search for the replacement of Adrian Martinez, who transferred out after his 4 years. Thompson and fellow transfer Chuba Purdy from Florida State are thought to be the two favourites battling it out, with Purdy starting training lightly following his injury.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would be very surprised if Casey Thompson isn't the starter come game one for Nebraska. I think it's a good move for him. Obviously, he got out of Texas after starting for most of the year because of Haynes King injury, but he's now. I'll be very surprised if he doesn't become the starter day one for Texas.
Haynes King's at Texas A&M. Do you mean Hudson
Sorry,
Card?
I mean Hudson Card, yeah. And they have another
Quinn Ewers
lad
is
there
there
at
now,
Texas
obviously.
as well. Yeah. So
The former Buckeye.
yeah, he is indeed. But I think it was it's a benefit for Thompson getting out and having that year as a starter as well for Texas. So that gives him good standing at Nebraska.
Yeah, good move for Casey Thompson, I think. Good move.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. We've managed to get to the main bulk of the show, Ash, in under 10 minutes, which is hugely unlike us.
Definitely is.
We did quarterbacks a couple of weeks ago. We were going to do running backs last week, but a mock draft got in the way. Standard procedure for us at 5 Yard here. Well, we're going to do running backs and tight ends today.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility perhaps that running backs takes too long and tight ends get shifted, or are we going to cram these both in regardless?
I reckon we can get them both in. I managed to get 7 or 8 quarterbacks in the last one, so I reckon as long as we don't. Well, I mean, it is both of us this week, so no, we'll see. We'll have to see, won't we?
I mean, yeah, it's always fun when you and I get involved.
Yeah, exactly.
In the list in front of me, Ash, we've got Breece Hall as the first person we're going to be talking about. Is he your consensus #1 running back at the moment?
He is at the moment, yes.
Okay, me too.
Yeah.
Did that change from the combine, or I had him #1 first, and I think the combine just cemented that position for me.
Yeah, I still had. There was a couple of spaces between him and Walker before the combine, and that hasn't changed for me. I think Hall's combine overall has just reaffirmed my faith in him being the #1 running back in this class.
Yeah, agreed. There's lots of people who have got Kenny Walker at 1, and this isn't the class where you've got. I want to say Jonathan Taylor, but was Jonathan Taylor everybody's consensus #1 last year? 2 years ago, probably not. Whereas Najee Harris last year, consensus #1 running back for the group. This group seems to me, if you look at mock drafts and stuff, there is a spacing there, tighter bunched than, and realistically, if you look at the players available on the offensive, defensive side of the ball, line-wise, cornerbacks, wide receivers, if we see a running back in the first round, it will be a massive, massive surprise. So when you look at big boards and stuff, these guys are anywhere from 70, maybe 45 to 70, and somewhere in that range. So it isn't the elite class of running back that we're perhaps used to seeing. However, I think Breece Hall has got the ability to get better as he goes into the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. I think out of all of them, Breece Hall is probably one step ahead, as you say. And if it wasn't such a heavy class in other areas, he probably would be in the back end first consideration, very early second. I still have him sort of early to mid second round at the moment. But I think out of everybody, from what I've seen, he is the one for me, and he is the clear one. I think Kenneth Walker has got closer. But Breece Hall is still the one for me, as he has been for last year as well, looking ahead to this one. But
before we dive into Breece Hall, do you think he is the only bell cow back in this class?
I wouldn't say he's the only bell cow. I do think that Walker has the potential. He has got things that he needs to work on to enable him to be that, which we'll get onto later. But I think if we're looking at anybody in this draft class, Hall is probably the only one realistically that has shown it all consistently that he can be a bell cow. There's things with everybody else that they're either lacking because of the way that the type of running back that they are, or that they're just not capable of doing. Whereas I think Hall on his day can realistically do everything, and has shown that he can do everything.
Yeah, so let's talk some Breece Hall, as we have been done. And obviously played at Iowa State. He's 5'11", 217 pounds. He's also very thick with that 217 pounds. He's not a light.
Yeah.
I know that sounds odd to say, a light 217 pounds, but you do see it in some NFL players. But he's got a good size for the running back position, which I like to see when I'm looking at my running backs. Strengths, Ash, size and power. We've mentioned that. He's got top level speed, and that was something that going into the combine, perhaps he was. I think we might have mentioned it, or me and George did at some point. Like Breece Hall, he's got the long speed, but his initial 40 time wasn't perhaps that fast. But he went in and ran a 4.39, which is superb. Sort of crosses the T's, dots the I's for him, and brings that not only fast long speed, but some short speed as well. So that was what nailed it in for me, for him being the number one running back.
Yeah, definitely. As you say, he's shown that speed at the combine. I think he's always had the explosive speed in the short yard game and through the gaps, which is another strength that I have for him, is his ability to explode through those gaps in the line. But I think at the combine, he's shown that he has got the top end speed, and at times in some of the plays that he made for Iowa State, he's shown that he can get away from the defenders and into open field. And then he's got the power to back that up. As you say, he's that running back. Yes, he's 217 pounds, but he's a big 217 pounds. He's a muscular, wide framed 217 pounds with the speed and explosiveness to back it up. And I think that the thing that I really like about Breece Hall, and it reminds me of Le'Veon Bell from his early years in the NFL, is his patience. His patience behind the line. He'll wait for a hole to open up, and if it doesn't, he can make a hole, or he can get on the outside. But he's got that vision, that almost elite vision that you want from a running back, to see the gap, to take it and explode through it and make a play. And I think that's the key strength for me for Hall. And then on the top of that, the thing that puts him over the edge as a potential workhorse is his passing work. Yes, it was limited at Iowa State. It wasn't something that he was asked to do a great deal of time, but he has shown, I think he's picked up 20 plus and 30 plus last year receptions. He's shown that he's got good hands, and he's shown that he's effective catching the ball.
Yep. I mean, we're looking at last year's stats. Obviously, he had receptions last year. He had 36 receptions. So the previous 2 years, he had 23 receptions. Last year, he had 36. So his usage went up in the receiving game. He averaged 9 yards a reception in college, which is pretty good for a running back. Only ever had 3 touchdowns, 6 throughout his career. But as a running back, it's funny when we think about running backs going into the NFL, it's running back by committee now, isn't it? Pretty much there's only Derrick Henry who is a running back on his own. Maybe Najee Harris. We saw he had huge usage at the Steelers last year. But you look at most other teams, even Jonathan Taylor's got Naheem Hines to do the passing down back. And as good as Jonathan Taylor is, yes, he can catch the football, but with Breece Hall, he offers a little bit more than I would say Jonathan Taylor does in the receiving game. Is he as much of a downfield runner as Jonathan Taylor? Probably not, because he's fantastic. But what we're seeing now in the NFL is you don't need to be the one and done running back. There's going to be a committee. Running backs are becoming devalued because of the shortness of their longevity in the NFL. Yeah. So Breece Hall for me is the perfect fit for a committee back, in the fact that he can catch the ball, but maybe you bring someone in for a third down back occasionally just to mix it up, change some routes. Or maybe you have 2 backs in and the passing place works either way on that. But as a running back, averaging 5.5 yards a carry over his career, that's great. It's over the 5 yards that we look for. See, there's the name. 20 touchdowns last year, 21 the year before that. Iowa State in the Big 12. As a running back, Ash, how do you value that work compared to something like the Big 10 or the SEC?
It is difficult. I think when you look at the Big 12 and some of the defenses that he does come up that are involved in that conference, it is looked at times, but I don't think you can take away too much of that from from Hall because he has come up against some bigger programs and he has performed well against those programs. So I wouldn't. It's always impressive for a running back to put up almost 1,500 yards and over 1,500 yards in back-to-back seasons, and 20 plus touchdowns, regardless of who's in front of you. And I think there are some impressive defenses in the Big 12 that he has come up against in all 3 years that he's been at Iowa State.
Did you? Sorry, Ash, you went dark there. I think I may have froze or something. I got most of it. Have you mentioned his almost 600 touches in the last 2 seasons alone?
No, not quite yet. That was going to be one of the weaknesses, shall we call it, that I do see from Hall. Although he has stayed fit for his almost his whole career at Iowa State, barring last year, he did miss a few games. I don't think he missed any games, but he was banged up on a couple of occasions. He's had an incredibly high volume of work in 3 seasons, and in particular, the last 2 seasons, he's seen almost 600 touches, which is a phenomenal amount of touches for a running back to see before they've stepped on an NFL field.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's had 800 total plays in his 3 years at Iowa State. We talked about this with Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, he had a massive workload at Wisconsin over his time there, and that was possibly a bit of tread on the tires. But because he hasn't had an injury with those touches, I don't think this is as a big, because of the way the running back by committee thing is happening in the NFL. I don't think, yes, it might be a weakness. Maybe a few less touches would help, but I'm not sure it's something to be hugely concerned about.
Says a lot about Breece Hall and the tape that is one thing that I put down, doesn't it? But I think yes, you're right about the committee, and you're right about Jonathan Taylor sort of debunking that whole too many touches in college, because I don't think it matters as much at all anymore. But it is something that I do believe people still do pay attention to, that we do need to take into consideration. How long realistically can he sustain those types of touches in the NFL?
Yeah, I wasn't saying that it's, there's always an exception that proves the rule, and perhaps Jonathan Taylor is that guy who is luring us into a false sense of security with the touch thing. I don't know. Let's move on then. We got Kenneth Walker next. Is he your number 2 guy still, or has that changed?
No, he is still number 2. That hasn't changed. He had a much like Hall. He had an impressive combine. I think we already knew from Walker that he had speed and that he was explosive, and he backed that up with his 40 time 0.1 quicker than Hall. He ran a 4.38, and he's shown at his time last season at Michigan State that he regularly can beat defenders with speed, and the way he cuts in and cuts out and makes defenders miss, it's all there on paper. But I think the added benefit to Walker that you don't often see with a player that is quick and can make a defender miss is just how much he likes to make contact, and how confident he is when he does so. He takes contact well. He's got a good lower body power to make up those extra yardage under contact. He drops his shoulder. He looks to go through a defender, and there's not very often that you see him go down under the first challenge. He regularly shrugs off a defender or powers through a tackle, and then it's the next 1 or 2 players after that then brings him down.
Yeah, let's talk about those jump cuts. If you've ever seen Kenneth Walker play or watched any tape at all, he's the type of guy who can go from running downfield to running sideways or cutting sideways, like Ash says, on a dime, but not only on the dime, at the same speed. It's almost as if he's got a strafe button, which is ridiculous. When you actually go and watch some of his highlight tape, just note as to how his sideways movement is almost as fast as his forward movement, because that is breathtakingly fast.
Yeah, his feet are so good. Like you say, it's almost it's almost seamless, the transition from one direction to another, and it's something that you love to see in a running back. And as I said, Walker has got that, as well as the power to back it up when he does make contact.
Yeah, and it isn't just the footwork on footwork, on the cuts and the routes he's running. It's when he gets into a pile as well. You can see the legs keep going, keep pushing him forward, like you said, like that first challenge. He doesn't come to a wall and be like, "Oh, I'm stuck." He's pushing forward, and there's a yard, an extra yard and a half, and they all count. When that first down line is 10 yards away, those extra yards all really count. So obviously weaknesses. Great 2021. We all saw it.
Yeah.
2 years at Wake Forest before that. Now we had 13 touchdowns in 2020, so it wasn't an absolute disaster, and that was only in 7 games.
Yeah. So he was it was difficult Wake Forest because they ran a committee approach, shall we say? So I think that was one of the reasons why he got out and decided to move on, because he wanted to be that main man. But he was by no means disappointing at Wake Forest, but he was used in a particular way that didn't really show off everything that we wanted, that you wanted to see, and that we saw last year once he landed in Michigan State. So I think the dominant 2021, of course, is going to be in everyone's mind because of just how well he did, and the fact that he was in consideration for the Heisman. I think, where did he end up? Third in the end, or second? I can't remember where he came officially. He was top 3, 100%. I can't remember if he was second or third. But yeah, you do have to read into the two years at Wake Forest in terms of the actual usage and what he did there. But the tape from 1 year is good enough to almost counteract that. I think the main things for me that I've pointed out, and we didn't mention it with Hall, but it's accurate for Hall as well, is pass protection. If these two guys want to be the workhorse, the main running back for a program, both of their pass protections are going to have to be improved. The technique is not there. The blocking technique is lacking. It needs work. They almost just sort of try and put themselves in front of the defender or the rusher to sort of almost slow them down, and they're not really achieving that. So I think if they want to progress to be a top level elite running back that commands the backfield fully, pass protection is for me the main thing that Walker and also Hall would need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And the only other thing with Walker for me is he is very patient in the backfield. He'll wait for a hole to open up like before he goes. But I think sometimes he can be almost too patient and rely on the line in front of him and just sort of stay in the backfield that little bit too long. And when you haven't got a good offensive line in front of you that can make those gaps and that can move the defenders around, he could get stuffed in the backfield if he's not careful.
Yeah, my notes on him so far are that he's very much a downhill runner. He wants to run north to south, and he's very, very good at exploding through those gaps. But he's not quick enough for me to turn to the outside. Like you say, his patience will almost keep him jitterbugging behind the line as opposed to heading laterally and trying to break to the outside. I mean, pass catching, Ash, is it a problem? Obviously, he hasn't had too many receptions over his time, and up until last year, he had only had 6 receptions. He had 13 last year with 1 touchdown, only 89 yards, nearly 7 yards a reception. But then Michigan State don't tend to pass the ball to their running back. So is this something we could perhaps see a surprising amount more usage in the NFL, or is it just perhaps not part of his game yet?
It's really difficult to tell because of just how little work that he was given at Michigan State with the way they run, like you say, the way they run their offense. It's not something that they do. They don't use their running backs in the passing game. So it's almost an unknown as such at this time, but the limited work that I have seen on last year, I don't see anything fundamentally wrong with his passing work. But if that is going to be something that he can take into the next level, I really don't know. I think the training and preseason will tell on that front, really. And I can't remember how he did in the combine on the specific drills. So maybe as pro day we'll potentially get to see some passing work. But yeah, it's a bit of an unknown for me at the moment.
Yeah, I feel you. Next up we've got Kyron Williams. Now, interestingly, had Isaiah Spiller competed. Is this your order of running backs, Ash? Is Kyron Williams now your third running back?
It is at the moment. I do need to. This is the consensus off of our top 100. So these are the top. These are 1, 2, 3, 4 as it stands at the moment. I do still have Kyron at number 3, but above Spiller. And you're probably about to say it, but I think the combine, although it didn't do Williams any massive favors, he didn't light the world on fire. Obviously, the fact that Spiller didn't participate is, of course, going to have an impact.
How? What? I don't understand. Like, this is the biggest job interview of your career, and you don't go and work out. I understand he's going to work out at his pro day, but his pro day will be set up for him with stuff that A&M will put on show that he's done, and there's players there that he's used to. It will be, look at me. But that's great if you're doing it in your own house. Like, do you understand what I mean? It's done him no favors.
Yeah, I think it came down to he's still carrying an injury, so I do get it from that, but I completely agree with you. Yes, the pro days, you've always got to look at it and be like, this is your team, this is your pro day. They've done everything they can to make you look good, and obviously he hasn't got the combine to back that up, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, Kyron Williams, I love the dude. Obviously, when we went on the Dynasty pod, and you were unfortunately not available to come, I asked Rich about Kyron Williams because he said he'd done it, and he wasn't a huge fan of him, whereas I am a massive Kyron Williams fan. He is. I want everything that Kyron Williams does in my running back. I just wish he was 10 pounds heavier.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I wish he was a little bit heavier, because I also wish he was a little bit quicker. I think for a guy that is so versatile and so good in a lot of areas, the one thing that's missing from me is a bit more on his frame and the sort of the top end speed. I think it is slightly lacking, but he is arguably the most versatile running back in this draft class. I would say he's probably the best passing back receiver. The best receiving running back in the draft class. But the thing that really, really surprises me, and that really surprised me on the tape that I watched, is just how good he is in pass protection. For a guy his size, he is one of the best in pass protection in this running back class, which is crazy to me looking at him on paper. But he reads the plays incredibly well. He uses his speed and explosiveness to make contact with rushers and defenders early and disrupt the play. It's so surprising just how good he is in the pass protection. If anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about and look at Kyron Williams on paper and go, how is that possible? Just go and watch his tape and pay attention in particular to the pass protection. It is top level. I would put my hat on that it is one of, if not the best in the class in terms of pass protection.
And
with everything else on top of it.
Exactly. And he brings that maneuverability, aggression, and hand placement. Everything he does in pass protection, he also does as a running back. So when you think he's 5'9", 114 pounds, he does everything a bigger guy would do in that package. So you're right, he should be a little bit faster, and perhaps he might add a bit of muscle going into the NFL with perhaps slightly better conditioning and training and stuff like that. Because it's really interesting to me how he uses those skills and traits from, I don't want to say he's like pass blocking first, because that wouldn't be fair to him, but everything he does well in pass blocking, he does well as an undersized running back. And I mean, 194 isn't the smallest running back we've ever seen, but he's not, your 215 up to your 220 size, which is a bigger running back. So but it's weird to me that when you watch him, he doesn't actually play as if he was 194. He plays like a 205 to a 210 guy. And his last 2 seasons at Notre Dame have really shown that. He's played 12 games in both seasons. He's had over 200 attempts, averaged 5.1 for his career, 27 touchdowns. But it's the receiving game. He's had 35 in 2020 and then 42 in 2021. averaged 8.7 throughout his career. Hasn't had the touchdowns perhaps to go with that, but maybe that's because they've used him elsewhere in the receiving game as opposed in the red zone and stuff like that. So he's not breaking off huge receptions. He's more of maybe the dump off guy, but he does it effectively and he can get that extra yardage. So for me, the fact that he was on my championship winning side makes it a little bit sweeter. But I am absolutely in love with Kyron Williams, and I think he's going to prove a few people wrong at the next level.
Yeah, definitely. I think he can contribute on all three downs. I think that he will potentially be limited to being as we said right at the start, it's rare that anyone is now, but I think the workhorse, the main running back for a team, because his size and his lack of overall power, he utilizes his technique more than he does his power. But when he makes contact with a pile, let's say to get those 1 or 2 yards, if he makes contact with the pile, it's not very often that he can power his way through that. And the only other slight hindrance for me is he does have a history of fumbles, 3 last year, 5 in 2020. And from what I've seen, it comes down to the way he handles the ball and the way he places the ball. If he gets a big hit on him, the ball can get dislodged just with the way he holds it. But that is something that can be taught at the next level. That is as simple as this is how you need to hold the ball going forward and work on that. And I'd hope that's the case anyway. It could be. I'm sure someone has told him that before. So it may be that it is fundamentally something that he just cannot get on with. But it is one thing that you do have to take into consideration. But I can't remember who it was. Was it last year or the year before where someone had a history of fumbles in college, and that was played a big factor in his initial draft stock, and it made absolutely no difference when he got to the NFL. There's someone who has real issues with it, and it doesn't seem to have affected him at all. So it could have absolutely no bearing on him in the NFL, but on tape and at Notre Dame, it is something that does stand out.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to Isaiah Spiller, who you've got as our consensus number 4. I don't think I'd have him at 4. I think I'll have him at 5 because there's somebody else I would have put ahead of him. But he played at Texas A&M, 6 foot, 217, 217 pounds, I should say. Some people might not have followed along there. Because I haven't actually seen that much Isaiah Spiller. I know the name banded around. People have said he's one of the best backs in the class. Does he do anything that is really good, or is he just good at everything?
I think he is definitely good at everything, but he reminds me of more of the old school power running back when you watch him, and I think that's not a bad thing at all. I think that's something that still works incredibly well in this day and age. I mean, look at Derrick Henry. He is an absolute beast of a ball running back, and he's arguably one of the best in the league. And Isaiah Spiller is one of those physical, well-built power runners that is tough to bring down. When he initiates contact, he's tough to bring down. He keeps moving his feet. He looks to punch through the gaps with the power, and again, he's rarely brought down on the first hit, and it's not something you do see all the time anymore in the modern game. But it's something. If I had to put Spiller in a category, is where I would put him. He is a power runner.
Yeah. Do we think the fact that Haynes King, or it was Haynes King who got injured last year, and then Zach Calzada came in?
Zach Calzada, yeah.
Do we think that the quarterback's lack of good quarterback play, shall we say, helped defenses sort of stack the box last year against Spiller and perhaps hold him back a little bit, which is why he's not getting the pop that maybe we thought he was going to get going into the season?
Yeah, I would say it definitely has to be a factor where when you can scheme your defense around stopping the running back, it's always going to have an impact. But at the same time, I think Spiller's still shown enough to sort of counteract that. And there was a time where he was looking at being the best running back in this class. I think others around him have shown out more in the last couple of years that has unfortunately pushed his stock down a bit. But there isn't anything I can see from Spiller that worries me at all. I think, as I said, he's a power running back, but on the same breath, if you watch his tape, when he gets into the open field, he can make a defender miss at the next level. He does have that in his locker. Passing work is again, A&M, it's not their strong suit, so there's not a great deal of it on tape, but in the passing game, he has shown good hands. He rarely dropped the ball. I think whenever it went to him in the limited, maybe 20 plus a season, but under 30, I don't think he dropped the ball once or only a handful of times. So he's shown that he can do that. I do think he is more well-rounded than people give him credit for, but he's a physical runner at the end of the day. He's a bulldoze running back.
Yeah. Before we move on to our honourable mentions, Ash, is there anything Spiller you want to touch on any further? Or
I think, just some of the weaknesses that I have pointed out, and it is a recurring theme for almost all of these top guys, bar Williams, is the blocking game. He's distinctly average when it comes to pass protection and run blocking, not to the same extent as Walker and Hall. Spiller has got the ability in both areas, but he doesn't really pop out on either of them. He's not bad, but he's not good. He's sort of, as I say, distinctly average in his protection, pass protection, and run blocking. And we mentioned the passing game. It may well be down to Texas A&M, but it is a bit of an unknown. And it's a limited route running tree that we've seen from him because of that. So that's something that I would like to see more from him if he was to take a step up.
Okay, right. We've got honourable mentions. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, many running backs.
Lots of them.
I want to start with Tyler Algiere from BYU because I would have him above Isaiah Spiller.
I thought you would.
Why did you say that? Why did you say it like that?
No. I just thought you would. I know how much you love him.
Oh yeah, beast, absolute beast. Obviously, if you don't know, played at BYU, is 5'11", 222 pounds, so short but thick. Don't know what he ran at the combine, Ash. Do you know what he ran at the combine? Did he participate in the combine?
I will tell you in one sec. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Oh, that's poor.
I know, right? I focused on the four guys.
That's fair.
Yeah, he did. He ran a 4.6.
A 4.6?
Yeah, 4.6 flat.
That feels slow.
That is. I'm looking at the official combine results. Yeah, 4.6.
Well, that's slow. I did not know that. I would still have him above Spiller because he participated.
Yeah, true.
So the reason I've got him is I think he does everything well. He's not elite at anything. I think that what he does do well, he has good vision. Occasionally, he sort of runs into the back of a lineman if a gap isn't quite big enough. We've seen that. He is elusive. He can break tackles, but he isn't like a yards after the catch kind of guy. He's not going to get into the secondary and then keep going. He doesn't have that top end speed, but he can get to the secondary. For me, it's his competitive toughness, which is where I think we saw it in the season when he chased down an interception thrown by, it wasn't Jaron Hall, it was someone else. But anyway, he chased him down, punched the ball out, and then the quarterback received it, so picked it back up. So we've seen the competitive toughness throughout the season. The fact he played linebacker, I didn't realize he played an entire season for BYU at linebacker.
Yeah,
I thought he came in
first season, wasn't it?
A second year. I think he played 4 games as a running back in 2018, and then in 2019 played 11 games as a running back. Linebacker, sorry. Unbelievable that he just had one season of being a linebacker in a career where he's turned into be one of the better running backs in this class. Last year was his big year. He played 13 games, had 276 attempts, which is a fair amount of attempts, 1,600 yards and 23 touchdowns. BYU have been fantastic for the last 2 years. Their schedule, I would absolutely have loved to see Tyler Algiere play in this year coming up. BYU's schedule this year is brutally tough. They play Notre Dame, they play Oregon. They play a couple of other absolute tough games. When you think they can pick their opponents, they have really scheduled this season with there's some real bite to their opponents. So if Tyler could have had one more year in college, this would have, and they played well, it would have been a fantastic season for him to put some real good tape up for next year's draft. But obviously he's in this year's draft, and that's a fantasy of mine. But where do you stand on Tyler Algiere?
So he is currently 6th for me, but there's 3 that are incredibly close. That's Spiller, Algiere, and Pierre Strong, who is currently my number 5. But, so they are all incredibly close, and I think the pro day for Spiller may have an impact on that, on my standing. But I think if anything, Pierre Strong's probably going to go to my number 4. Based off of what I saw in the combine. I think he, I mean, we'll talk about him now. But Pierre Strong Jr. from South Dakota, he impressed me massively at the combine. I think he ended up running a 4.37. Now, I expected relatively good speed from him because I think his straight running speed is great, but there was a bit of concern about his overall speed. But he managed to crack off a 4.37, and I think that surprised a lot of people. And he backs it up with just how physical he can be. He's 5'11", 205 pounds, I think he weighed in at. But he's such a physical running back with the speed to back it up. And he's so confident just going into a challenge and coming out on the other side. He'll make a defender miss as much as he will go through a defender. And one thing that you have to take into consideration is he was at South Dakota, so he was at FCS, so he hasn't played that top level competition, which always has to be a factor when it comes to any player. But everything I've seen from Pierre Strong, just it fills me with confidence that he can do it at the next level. I think he is one of those running backs that if he's lined up alongside someone in a committee, I think he's going to excel massively. And one thing that's missing from his game, by no fault of his own, is passing work, because South Dakota just didn't give him the ball. But when he does get the ball in his hands, or when he's involved in the passing game, he's brilliant at it. So I think Pierre Strong could be a dark horse in this NFL draft, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him continue to rise up the draft boards for people the more they watch him, because if anybody goes and watches his tape, I think you'll fall in love with him. Most of you who have been listening for a long time will know my love affair for the FCS players and the South Dakota and North Dakota players in particular. But yeah, Pierre Strong is right up there for me this year.
Absolutely. Somebody else who I am a big fan of, and I think had a fairly good combine and a great Senior Bowl, was Brian Robson Jr. from Alabama. I think he did his draft stock the world of good. Now, we're used to seeing running backs from Alabama who are title headline players. Brian Robson Jr. is a running back who is very, very good in his own right. He just isn't Alabama good. And that, I think, has done him. If he'd have been on another team, we could well have been talking about him differently. But I think he has gone about his business really, really well. And he did have a fairly good 2021 season for Alabama. It's just he isn't the marquee running back that we're used to seeing.
No, I think the issue with, like you say, with Robinson is he's not a typical Alabama back. He never got the work really until this year when he did become the back for them, and he sort of really lacks. He's just not great at everything. If that makes sense, like he's not quick. He's not overly explosive. There just seems to be. He's just a good running back, if that makes sense. He's a competent running back that I think will end up in a committee, maybe as the third guy. There's just nothing really jumps out from what I've seen from him. But like you say, obviously very limited work, and then a year at Alabama when they expect so much from their running backs, and we expect so much from their running backs. That's probably had a bit of a negative impact, but as you say, he had a great combine, so that we could be looking back at this in 6 months' time or a year's time and going, how wrong were we about, or how wrong was I about Robinson? But
yeah, who was the running back who got drafted to the 49ers who's been really good last year? Mitchell?
James Mitchell.
No, not
Is it
James
James
Mitchell.
Mitchell?
No.
Elijah
Mitchell, that's it.
Yeah.
He was a 6th round pick, and he was one of the
Yeah.
best running backs in the class last year. So it does show you that it doesn't necessarily, draft capital is important, but occasionally these guys do pop off. We've got both Georgia running backs, Zamir White and James Cook, who I didn't realize until recently was Dalvin Cook's younger brother. If you're gonna send your sons to play college football, do you want them both to be running backs? That seems like a bit of a glutton for punishment in the Cook household. But I mean, easy for training because you can train them both to do the same thing, right? Of the pair, Ash, who's your favourite?
Zamir White has got to be. I think Cook. Yeah, no, it is Zamir White for me. If he's nasty, he's a nasty runner. He's aggressive, sometimes even violent, but in the right ways. He's got good feet, good vision, and when it comes to seeing the gaps and seeing the plays, just lacks a little bit of speed. And I think we've never really seen anything from him in the passing game. And then when you look at James Cook before this year, he's sort of really been there, if that makes sense. He's another one of these, much like Brian Robinson. He's been there but never overly involved until this year. So there's a bit of an unknown, but again, with Cook, nothing really jumps out at me. And Zamir White, I do like what I've seen from him, but he is definitely a 1-2, the first or second down running back, power running back. I think that's all we'll see from him at the next level.
Yeah, somebody else, Damion Pierce from Florida, 220, 5'9".
He's an interesting one.
Yeah, he hasn't really been used, has he? He's very underutilized in how the Gators played football, split backfield and stuff like that. But he's pretty powerful, and he likes like Zamir White likes a bit of contact, and is very violent with his contact. So I don't know much about him. I just know that he's a downhill runner.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think he is a downfield runner. He wasn't used a great deal at Florida, and then sort of the Senior Bowl and the Combine, he's really shown out what he can do, which is, as you say, we see it all the time. I think he's capable in the blocking game. He's shown capabilities in the passing game, but I need to look more at him. I haven't seen enough of his tape to make a decision on him as it stands at the moment. He's a bit of an unknown for me.
And then we've got Jerome Fong Ford from Cincinnati and Zonovan Knight rounding off your list of notable mentions, Ash.
Yeah. Nothing really to sort of I mean, I think they're
on the notable mentions.
Yeah, no, they are. They're on there as notable mentions, as they are regularly showing their faces in people's conversations. And as Jerome Ford at Cincinnati, that whole offense was impressive. It was a unit that ran well from the quarterback all the way to the tight end and the wide receivers and the running backs. And I think Jerome Ford, benefited from that. But at the same time, individually, he's shown what he is capable of. I think he is another one of those running backs that is good at everything, but not great at anything. So I think he would make a perfect committee type player at the next level, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him go 4th or 5th round.
Just looking down another list I've got in front of me here, there's so many running backs in this draft class that we're used to seeing in college football that perhaps might not even get drafted, and it would be a huge, huge shame. Ash, you've got 10 minutes to talk tight ends. I'll lead you in. We're going to start with Trey McBride from Colorado, 6'4", 246 pounds. So this guy's a big, big lad. What do you know about Trey McBride?
Well, I mean, he is my number one tight end. I think he is probably the most well-rounded tight end in this draft class. He is nasty when it comes to both the passing game and as a blocker. And I think his blocking, he's always been viewed as a receiving pass catching tight end, but his blocking ability has got better year on year for Colorado State. He is a yard after the catch machine. When he gets the ball, he will run through players like they're not even there. He puts his pads down. He's a big build player, 6'4", 246 pounds. So he's not the tallest for a tight end, but he is. You look at his frame; he's well built for his frame, and it shows. And as I say, he's got absolutely no issues with making contact with someone and just shrugging them off like they're not even there. And at the same time, his actual pass catching ability is top tier for a tight end. He's great at tracking the ball in the air. He can adjust to poor throws in the air, whether they're behind him, over his shoulder, wherever it may be. He just seems to be able to move his body to get to them. He's got great hands. I rarely saw on his tape him losing a ball. And he is, I would say he's probably the best receiving tight end, the best pass catching tight end in this draft class. Maybe one other guy that I'll speak about in a minute. But I would say if I had to put money on it, McBride is the best pass catching tight end that has improved his blocking ability. So he's almost getting to that level of being a complete tight end. The few weaknesses from him: he has only got average speed. He struggles to accelerate away from defenders, but that's then obviously where the yak ability comes into play and his physicality. So he doesn't have that change of direction to avoid a defender. So he has to utilize his power and his strength to outmuscle and put a player down. And as I say, although him being one of the best pass catching tight ends in this class, his route running does need to be improved. He doesn't run his routes to completion. They're not always crisp and sharp. They leave sometimes a bit to be desired, and his start off the line of scrimmage can sort of be a step off, which again are things that he will need to improve on at the next level. But overall, he's easily, that's a lie, he's not easily my first tight end to be taken. I think all three of these guys are very close together, but if I had to put money on it, McBride will be the first to go. He is my number one, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him go in the second round.
Interesting. The name I know from the tight end list who isn't, let me just check for, he's not in these top three guys we're going to talk about, is Charlie Kohler. Going into the season, he was the number one tight end, and obviously you haven't got him. He's probably an honourable mention, but
he was, yeah. I've taken them out because I don't think we'd have time, but he was last year. He was right up there as one of the top tight ends, and I think it's more down to players around him improving and him deciding to go back to school last year. And by no means did he have a bad year, but he didn't have a great year, whereas people around him did. He also he wasn't at the combine, or he didn't participate in the drills at the combine. He just, unfortunately, while everyone's been going up, he's just sort of stayed at the same level, which has really not done him any favors. But his on paper, his physical's great. He's 6'6", almost 6'7", I believe, 250 pounds. But it's just unfortunate that players around him have improved throughout 2021, and his decision to go back to school might not have been the right decision.
No. Next up, you've got Jalen Weidemeyer.
Jalen Weidemeyer, yeah, Texas A&M, 6'4", 255 pounds. I mean, this kid.
How do people get this big?
I know. I mean, to be fair, I'm only just shorter than that, but I don't look like these guys. Let's just say that. I mean, but he backs up the way he looks with the way he plays. He is physical. He's a physically dominating player that has all the traits and abilities of a wide receiver. He's a weapon at all three levels. He stretches the field. He makes plays in the end zone and in the red zone. His route running is probably the best out of all of the tight ends. His runs are sharp. He finishes his routes. He's able to create separation. He's a threat on the deep throw because he's got top level speed, despite being 250 plus and 6'4". And then, as I say, he dominates in the red zone because of his size and athleticism. He can outjump and outmuscle defenders. He catches well in traffic. He's got great hands. He's got great tracking of the ball in the air, and he can make all of those difficult throws that you expect to see from a wide receiver. But this guy is a tight end, and he looks like a tight end. And he is regarded as, I mean, I said about it, but as McBride, and for me, that is still the case. But Weidemeyer is regarded as the best pass receiving tight end in the class. I would still put my money on McBride, but you just look at Weidemeyer on the field and on his tape, and you can't help but be impressed. The real thing that lets him down for me is in the blocking game. He's had limited experience as a blocker in college. It wasn't called upon at Texas A&M for him to block. He was an offensive weapon. He was an oversized wide receiver at the end of the day. But he tries. When he is called upon to be a part of the blocking game, he does try and make the blocks, but he plays high, which then obviously means he is easily maneuvered because he doesn't have that overall strength that you want to see from a blocking tight end. He's got the strength to outmuscle secondaries and linebackers when it comes to contested catches and the like, but in the actual blocking game, he just doesn't have that upper body strength that you need. He's got poor hand technique as well when it comes to the blocking game. It's just really something that it doesn't look like he's focused on it very much in his career, because he's been regarded as a wide receiver at the tight end position. And I think that's probably what we'll see from him at the next level. I think we'll more than likely see him in two tight end situations and as a third or fourth wide receiver as a big receiving threat.
Fair enough. Excuse me. Isaiah Likely, Coastal Carolina, Ash. He's next up at 3.
Yes, yeah.
He had one of the biggest games of the year last season, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he have like 240 yards and 4 touchdowns?
It was ridiculous, the game he had. And this year in particular has done him all sorts of favors. As I said at the start of the tight ends, these 3 tight ends are so close for me. It's literally, it potentially is a coin flip between all 3 of them. Likely, the more I watch him, the more I'm impressed by him, and he is potentially going to be creeping into number 2 for me. But as it stands, he is my number 3, and he's our consensus number 3. But with Likely, you get, again, 6'4", 245 pounds. One thing that with all of these guys is that when you look at the tight end position, 6'4", yeah, that's a big guy, but for a tight end, it's not. They're actually regarded as smaller tight ends, and it's crazy to think that, but they are all pass catching tight ends with blocking ability, barring Weidemeyer, which is one of his negatives, and it is the case for all 3 of these guys. It is the thing that they need to improve. But the strengths for Likely, great athleticism. He possesses very good speed for a tight end. He's quick off the line of scrimmage. He gets open due to his ability to change directions on the spot and the shifty footwork. He makes defenders miss, but he can also break down a defender. He will physically dominate a defender if needs be, as much as he'll make him miss in the open field. He'll outmuscle them in contested catches. He comes away with the ball more often than not in those situations, and he can get up to the highest point of the ball above a defender. And much like McBride, his blocking game has improved considerably this year in particular. He's shown that he can block, in particular in the open field. I think that's where it's best for him. When it comes to on the line of scrimmage, that's where he starts to struggle. It is still a weakness of his game because he doesn't have the power to outstrengthen defensive ends and linebackers, whereas he can do with secondaries. He just sort of almost throws himself at the bigger guys to try and stop them. Because I think he knows that he hasn't got the strength to be able to physically overpower these guys. So he just sort of throws himself at them because his hands, much like Weidemeyer, aren't great. He gets battered down and then he'll lose the momentum on the defender and they'll beat him. I do see him at the next level as much like Weidemeyer as a receiving tight end. But he does just need to polish off his routes. It does tend to, again, like McBride, just doesn't finish them. They're not as clean as they could be. But I think all 3 of these guys are incredibly well-rounded when it comes to the receiving game. They're all going to be considerable threats for any team they land on from the tight end position, and it's just going to cause people mischief. I mean, look at how well a player like Kelsey does as an offensive weapon. These guys will give an offense that sort of weapon. All three of them will.
So you heard it here first, everybody. Ash just called these three guys the next Travis Kelce.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant.
Just an average comparison there, Ash. Possibly the greatest.
No, I'm not comparing these players to them. I'm comparing their ability to change an offense.
What you're saying is these guys are weaponized systems as opposed to concrete walls for the NFL.
Yes, 100%. 100%. They're wide receivers playing at the tight end position.
Essentially like Kyle Pitts last year.
Exactly like Kyle Pitts last year. Yeah.
Ooh. So one of the most coveted tight ends to come out of college in recent history. Ash has compared these three to that is a comparison for these three, Kyle Pitts and Travis Kelce. If these three don't pop off in the NFL next year, so it's going down, Ash is in big trouble. There's a few names that spring to mind that Ash, there isn't an honourable mentions list here, so I don't know whether you finished the weaknesses for Isaiah Likely or...
No, I have, I've left off the honourable mentions, just conscious of time, but we have got a few minutes because there are definitely some guys that we haven't spoken about that do need to be spoken about. You mentioned Kohler earlier. There's Cade Otton from Washington, Jeremy Ruckett from Ohio State. There are still this is actually a very good tight end class, which is unusual to see.
Yeah, so
many tight ends in one respect.
Well, I mean, you haven't even mentioned somebody like Jelani Woods, who had a good combine from Virginia. He had a good year last year, and the combine was good and showed that he can pass, but he can catch the football at least in that Virginia offense. And then you've got somebody like Cole
Turner from Nevada. Yeah.
Carson Strong was a big proponent of Cole Turner, especially in the red zone. Didn't have that many receptions, but was a big end zone target. And then somebody like James Mitchell from Virginia Tech. He got injured, I think, either preseason or week one last year, and he was pretty much going to be their main target and is a very good tight end in his own right, but didn't see the season out because of injury. I don't know what the status on his injury return is, but he could have quite a good NFL career as well. So like you said, this is...
Greg Dulcich from UCLA. He's had a great Senior Bowl and combine, and he had a great year at UCLA. There is Jake Ferguson, Wisconsin. There's so many tight ends in this class that could make a difference. It is a incredible tight end class that somebody, a few teams are going to get themselves an absolute bargain. They really are, because there are some very impressive tight ends coming out this year.
You mentioned Chigozie Okunwokunu from Maryland, Ash.
I didn't because I can't really pronounce his name. But however, he is another guy that's in that. There's literally, as I say, there's 12 to 15 guys here that could generally find themselves starting on an NFL team next year or next couple of years.
Okonkwo from Maryland did run a 4.52, which is fairly impressive for a tight end. So he's obviously a receiving threat as well.
Yeah. Lots of receiving threats at the tight end position this year.
Well, I think the way the NFL is going as a passing game and running back by committee, it makes sense for tight ends to be receivers.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Ash, we almost managed it. We almost managed to keep that within the hour. I enjoyed that. I still feel there are running back names out there that we haven't mentioned, which concerns me when the draft isn't that far away.
But there's always going to be, isn't there? I think there's...
You're a lot more cutthroat than I am.
I am definitely. But when you got a certain amount of time, you've got to focus on the top guys. I mean, there's definitely... there's a lot. There's loads of guys. Tyler Badie, who we didn't mention. Kennedy Brooks.
Borgie.
Kennedy Brooks.
CJ Vidal, Travis Dye. These are all names that are just...
Jaron Ely, who last year, before he decided not to declare, was right up there in conversation. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Rashad White.
Yep.
Arizona State. I mean, there's loads of guys. There really are, but you've just got to sort of put them in a tier level. And I think as it stands at the moment, those four who we mentioned, I think are on that, and same with the tight ends. But yeah, the closer we get to the draft, the more names will come up, the more tape that we get to watch, and and I'm sure things will change as they do every single year.
And then we may well mention this when we do the week-long mock draft where we do 7 rounds. So you never know. There'll be some names that fly out at the end of it. We're still going to try and do that, but I'm not sure how we're going to work that one out yet. But we will do it somehow or other. Ash, we've done running backs. What's up next? Who's up next? What position groups are we going to be?
We've got the best position group next.
Oh, that means it's lineman.
It is the offensive line next. Yeah, that is it is the O-line next week, interior and tackles. So I'm excited. I love the O-line, as you well know. So I'm very excited for it. I think we've got. Yeah, it's like, again, there's going to be like 12 to 13 guys that we could potentially be talking about.
You say we.
It could well be sort of about.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of title reading from me and not a lot else. O-line is not my most. Ash, you played a little while ago, right? Yeah. You played line. Did you play both lines?
I did, yeah. I played offensive line and defensive line. I mainly played defensive line as an edge, but I did also play guard as well. So that's why I have a love affair for the lines.
And it's completely fair and warranted. As an offensive or defensive, before we get out of here, I do have a question.
Go on.
Did you... I want to say, did you have something you looked for in running backs when your running back was playing? Or was it a case of this guy's playing running back and we've got nobody else?
No, so we had a couple of different guys. We had one who was just a power... He was a fullback, essentially, but playing running back for us the whole time. So we would have to make the blocks in front of him for him and open up. He was going straight through the middle. And then we also then had another guy who was more quick and speedy. So at that point, it was then we'd have to make the blocks and on outside because he'd be gone before we'd even initiate contact. So you're essentially, at times we're essentially playing a screen on every run play because he was out that quickly that we just have to get there in front of him as well.
Amazing. That sounds like
and then on the flip side, I'll be honest with you, when I was playing edge, I was more often than not just focused on the quarterback.
Does that mean you were particularly bad in run pass option situations when you thought the quarterback had it and the running back was off the other way? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
you weren't double wrapping both of them on the tackle. Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm quite tall though, so I'd always still have the chance to jump above him if he try and dink over the top of me. But it's definitely more of a love affair for the pass rush than the run game when it came to the defensive side.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I thought I'd ask you that question. I thought about it today. I thought I'll ask Ash because he played. Maybe there was a preference on style of running back when he was playing on the O-line. I'm not sure, but it's interesting to definitely have that insight as to. Very, very interesting.
If I had to choose, it's the power back behind me because
you have to do less running.
No, it's because I like to. You can then get up close and personal with the defensive tackles and try and make that space. Whereas, you're chasing down a linebacker or
Yeah, fair enough. Rush Nation, it's been a blast. Running backs is one of my favorite positions. Don't forget to head over to the website because there are player profiles dropping now. There will be more coming. Luke jumped on the crew last week and has already dropped a Kenny Pickett one. Regardless of hand size, it's a good read. Listen, the draft is not far away. We have the offensive line next week, which Ash is hugely pumped about. I'll try and get psyched for it, Rush Nation. Until that time next week, don't forget Saturdays are for rushing too.